Tonight we're going to have a blast falsifying evolution twice. And then we're going to show a bunch of fossil frauds that the prestigious museums pushed on or promoted to the public, and they were lies. And we'll jump into that. But first, before we do that, I'll give you a quick update on our college ministry. I was at the community college. We had a kiosk, and we asked, were you taught lies? And that opened up a lot of discussion. And then, actually, that was Tuesday. And then yesterday, I gave the talk. And these flyers are up at St. Cloud State. And this one was ripped in half. And somebody taped it together. And then they put a little note at the bottom that said, "Stop ripping posters, you intolerant person." And so there was at least one person at St. Cloud State who was open-minded enough to let people think outside the dogma of evolution and the Big Bang. And I was there today at St. Cloud State and see what flyer thieves want to censor. And also evolution frauds tonight at 7. I talked to 2 instructors, one at the VOTEC yesterday and one at the St. Cloud State today. Which one do you think is more open-minded? You know, the one today at St. Cloud State, he said, "I'll never convince you and you'll never convince me." And I said, yeah, if you don't look at any more information, I won't convince you. But he won't look, even if a theory makes accurate predictions. And the instructor at the community college yesterday, it was a fun conversation. There were students around, and he'd be nodding when I'd be making valid points, and he'd push back when he thought I had to push back. But he was very open-minded at the community college. Not so much at St. Cloud State. So anyhow, and there was a big math contest. So there was a bunch of junior high kids running all over the place, and some of them stopped and talked to me, and I was able to let them know, you got to see both sides if you want to think, and you're not getting both sides in class, and you're just being forced to think that all there is blind chance and random collisions of atoms. It's like, do you think that building got put together by blind chance? They say no. I said it'd be absurd, right? And they say yeah. And I said, well, how much more absurd is it to think that your body got put together by chance? And then one of the kids says, well, why would they do that? And I said, well, they're government schools, and if you get rid of God, now who's in charge? The government. And so we had a lot of fun. There was one kid who said, have you had your meds today? And his friend said, he didn't mean it. We respect what you're doing, but it's a lot of fun out there. And let's see, what else has been happening? Oh, I got... Somebody wants to fly me down to Texas to help give a hydroplate theory talk. So that's pretty exciting. I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, those are the highlights. Oh yeah, those are the highlights. And then, that flyer that was up there, a friend of mine had one of them at his apartment complex on the bulletin board. And he went there, and not only was the flyer gone, the bulletin board was gone. And I thought, boy, that brings back memories, because when I started hanging up stuff at the college and the community, at St. Cloud State and the community college, yeah, those bulletin boards got, started to vanish for me. So there is that. All right, okay, let's do a quick review. We started this in January. This is our 4th session. The first session was Creation Basics, where we showed how there's 2 perspectives of the past. One is based on blind chance and random collisions of atoms, and the other one is based on a creator. And the one that's based on a creator actually can explain everything. And the one that's based on blind chance can't explain anything. And I encourage you to listen to Real Science Radio. They just had a podcast yesterday, and you can see it on YouTube. I saw it on YouTube. It's going to be broadcast on a radio station tomorrow. And it talks about Kevin Lee being right about these asteroids and from the hydroplate theory. And then CS 102, that's when we gave you good fishing holes for creation. These are really good websites there. You can see some good videos, some 1 or 2 minute videos. They're very entertaining, very informative. And then CS 103, it was the age of the earth. We looked at scientifically, how old is it? And then also biblically, how old is it? And I gave you a framework where you can go through and see how many years it was from creation to Nebuchadnezzar. So you link it to, based on Bible verses, you know how many years it is, and then you can jump to the secular timeline and see when Nebuchadnezzar was. And he took over in 605 BC, but you can see that one. That's CS 103. And tonight at CS 104, Evolution Falsified and Frauds. And let's start with the ringleader himself. This is Ernst Haeckel. And he was the greatest zoologist of the 19th century and became more famous than Darwin. He's probably the most widely read scientist in the world. And he had a book out there called The Riddle of the Universe, translated into every major language in the world. And what did he believe? He thought that the so-called lower races of mankind, like the native Africans, Australian Aborigines, and Chinese people, were much more closer to the animals than they were to the cultivated European world. And he's an expert. Should we trust the experts? I think we have to answer that. And he loved Darwin's theory, and he thought, if only there was some evidence. And there wasn't any evidence. So he thought he'd help the theory along, and he made these drawings. He said, hey guys, look at this. When we're being developed as the embryo stage, we all look the same. We're all going through the same evolutionary developmental stages, and that's farm. Just remember farm. Fish, amphibian, reptile, and mammal. That's our evolutionary how we got here. And he says, see, you can't tell if it's a fish, a salamander, a turtle, a chicken, a rabbit, a human. We all look the same. And nobody had a telescope and didn't know if he was telling the truth or not. But then when people checked on it, they don't look anything like each other. And it's not even the beginning of development. It's the mid. And let's listen to Dr. Wells.
If you go back earlier in development, the different classes of vertebrates look even more different.
According to Wells, Haeckel, and many modern textbooks, mislead students not just because of faked drawings, but because they leave out the earliest stages of embryonic development. What students are shown as the first stage of embryonic development is actually the mid-stage.
And very few textbooks show those earliest stages, and yet that's the whole point. It's the earliest stages that are supposed to be the most similar, and they're not. Some textbooks actually use photographs of embryos, but they pick only that stage and those classes that happen to look most similar. And they omit the earlier stages, and they omit those classes that don't look similar. So that, to me, is picking the evidence very carefully to support the theory, and that's not good science.
It's not just scientists or Christians that are saying it's frauds. It's secular journals too. A New Scientist says how fudged embryo illustrations led to drawn-out lies. This is from 2015, and it says it's embarrassing but true. Some of the most influential drawings in the history of biology are wrong, exaggerated to fit a theory. They're wrong. And it's very powerful too, influential. Because this is what they used in 1973. They said, babies being developed, they're just in the fish stage. It's okay to kill them with abortion. And that's how influential fraudulent drawings got abortion legalized in America. And it was decades after it was proven a fraud. And then this is from 1997, Embryonic Fraud Lives On. And those drawings still appear in reference books such as Gray's Anatomy. Who looks at that? That'd be your doctors, right? And they're being taught that fraudulent theory. And Haeckel confessed, and he was convicted of fraud by the University of Jena, but the drawings persist. That's the real mystery. Why is something that was proven wrong over 100 years ago was still in the textbooks? And this I had a hard time finding, but if you go into creationism.org, you can find Haeckel's Frauds and Forgeries, and you can download this book that was published in 1915. And in 2015, they did a preface for the book. It says exactly 100 years ago in 1915, scientists thought they had finally put to rest the fraudulent embryo drawings. A half a century of exposed fraud, and yet the ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, pseudoscience, that's the farm theory, and the wholly contrived biogenic law both remain in biology textbooks even today. And that was in 2015. And it goes on to say that by 1874, Haeckel's own scientific peers began to reprimand his false data. In fact, his own university in Germany censored him for his continued academic dishonesty. But the popular media of the day in Germany, England, and other countries generally sided with Haeckel since it told them what they wanted to hear. No more answering to the God of the Bible. And some things never change, I guess. Even back then, the media was anti-God. Nothing new under the sun. This is 1874. That's 9 years after the Civil War. That's before they invented the light bulb, I believe. Okay, so this is horse and buggy technology, and they're saying, hey, he's a fraud, he's lying. And his conscience worked on him real slowly, because 34 years later, December 29th, 1908, he confesses in the Berliner Volksstimme, and this is what he says. I begin at once with the contrite confession that a small fraction of my numerous drawings of embryos, perhaps 6 or 8%, are really falsified. And he goes on to say, after this compromising confession of forgery, I should be obligated to consider myself condemned and annihilated if I had not the consolation of seeing side by side with me in the prisoner's dock hundreds of fellow culprits, among them many of the most trusted observers and most esteemed biologists. So basically he's saying, yeah, I did it. I had false drawings, but everybody does that, is basically what he's saying. He declares that he has, after all, only done what other embryologists and biologists have done. Such sort of excuse only makes matters worse. If true, we have here the greatest blow ever struck against the reliability of scientific men and against the method of pushing evolution theory. If true. So is it true? He said, hey, everybody's doing it. Is that true? It's true that he said it, but is it true that everybody's doing it? Well, how would we know that? How would we know if it's true? We'd have to have somebody check the accuracy of the drawings and the fossils and see if they're accurate. And so what we're looking for tonight is somebody who wants to go to 15 countries on 5 continents, travel almost 300,000 miles, and take almost 250,000 photographs, and we'll give you 27 years to do it. Anybody want to do that? Here's the kicker. You got to fund it yourself. It's going to cost $40,000 a year for 30 years, $1.2 million. I called up a financial planner and said, how much would that be if you invested it? And he said, $2 million. And with their lost wages and lost cash investment, it was a $14 million project. And we don't have to do it because Dr. Carl and Debbie Werner did. Yeah, they did everything that's listed there. And they say, you know, why would they do that? Well, down at the bottom, reach one soul. It's priceless. That's what's on the books on your table. That's his 27 years of going around the country, finding out, you know, talking to the scientists, taking photographs of the fossil record and comparing it and studying it out. So that, and the last 3, they just came off the press a month ago. Just last month. So this is bombshell information. And these are beautiful books too. I was at the community college yesterday and there's a person who's in design and she goes, man, these are beautiful books. And that one right there that you got in the front, that's just his bibliography. That's 432 pages. And he did a lot of work for this. And Bob Enyart says, you know, when he goes through a book, he notes it up, highlights it, dog-ears it. It looks like it's gone through a war. But he couldn't bring himself to do that with these books. They're just too beautiful. But if you want to get quickly what's happening, go into my Facebook page, and I've got some interviews posted at the top. And this is the Real Science Radio one. And he's on there twice. They did 2 interviews. And so that's what I did the last couple of days. I went to St. Cloud State in their free speech zone, and I played on my Bluetooth speaker those interviews where he's talking about these frauds at all these museums. And also on Creation Today, they do a really good interview also. So those are good things to look at and also to share. He did a lot of work, but it doesn't do any good if nobody knows about it. So I encourage you to listen to these and share them. And who is this Carl Werner guy? All right, well, when he was 17, he was accepted into med school. And this college had, you could go from high school to med school, and he was sharp. He was really sharp. And he graduated he was in the 99th percentile. He graduated from med school when he was 23. He took his boards and he's in the 99th percentile. So he's in the top 1%. And then he went on to become an emergency room doctor. Oh, and by the way, do you know what you call somebody who graduated at the bottom of his med school class? He's the absolute worst student in the class. Anybody know? Doctor. That's right. You call him doctor. That's right. And so what happened with Carl is he was went out to pizza when he was 19. He's an evolutionist. He'd kind of turned his back on God, just studying, and got invited out to pizza. And a person asked him 4 questions that changed his life. He asked him, hey, do you believe in evolution, Carl? And he says, yeah. He said, well, what about the problems with the fossil record? You know, these transitional fossils that should have been found but haven't been found. He goes, oh, I didn't realize they haven't been found. He said, what about the problems with the Big Bang and the laws of physics? He goes, oh, I didn't realize there were problems with the laws of physics and the Big Bang. And then he said, and Carl, and this hit him right between the eyes, how can life begin if proteins don't form naturally? Because Mr. 99 percentile, he understands chemistry really well. He understands biology really well. And he knows that proteins don't form naturally under any circumstance. And so he's like, well, it bothered him. And the guy, he still believed in evolution, so the kid challenged him. I challenge you to prove evolution. He goes, that's crazy. It's been proven. I mean, look at the museums, the encyclopedias, the science journals. It's evolution, evolution, evolution. It's everywhere. It has to be proven, right? But those questions haunted him. He's there on a full ride science scholarship, and he can't explain how life began or where matter came from, and that bothered him. And so to his credit, he decided he'd review the evidence for the theory of evolution from top to bottom and then devise ways to test it. And so then he took 18 years to study evolution. He knows it inside and out, and that's what the first volume is this is evolution, and these are the reasons why it can't happen. And then he decided to do a science, that's after he's got it all, he's got to figure out a way to test it. And so using the scientific method, a scientist will start with an idea and then test the validity of his idea by vigorously trying to disprove it. And if you can't falsify it, then the original theory remains tentatively true. So you try to falsify it. And he thought, well, if evolution is false, we should find modern animals with the dinosaurs. Because the evolution theory says there was dinosaurs, and then millions of years later came the modern animals. And he said if it's false, we should find the modern animals with the dinosaurs. And guess what he found? All 3 groups of fish living today, both major amphibian groups living today, all 4 reptile orders living today, most are all bird orders living today, and all 3 types of mammals living today. So he found all these modern animals with the dinosaurs. And when I was cutting my teeth at St. Cloud State before my very first talk, the Atheist Club is hanging around, and there's a guy named Micah, and he liked to be called Yank. And I asked him, well, what evidence would you need to see for you to stop believing in evolution? And he said, a mammal with the dinosaurs. And I said, no problem. Here's 432 species that they have found with the dinosaurs. And I had the book out there, and he grabs the book. Who wrote this? What are his qualifications? Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So I showed him, and yet he didn't change his faith. Okay, because it's a spiritual issue. It's not an intellectual issue. And so this is what the Werners did. They'd go and talk to people in the field who were excavating these dinosaurs and fossils and stuff. Hey, do you find anything that looks modern? And that's what they found. 432 mammal species. But yet you go to the museums, you don't see the mammals with the dinosaurs. They went to 60 museums and they didn't see a single complete mammal skeleton from the dinosaur layers displayed at any of those museums. So you got the dinosaurs here, the mammals there, and the implication is there's millions of years. So the museums are not a good representation of what they're finding in the field. The museums are basically churches for the atheist. That's where they go to get their unbelief in God solidified. And it's at our tax dollar. And then I asked Yank, what's your best evidence for evolution? And he said the ape-man fossils. And we're going to destroy those in a few minutes. And then he said the whale. The transitional whale. And so let's go look at this. I've looked at all the curriculum around here. This is Cold Springs curriculum. And notice Rhodocetus is there. See, the theory goes, life started in the water, get on the land, and then went back into the water to make the whale. So whale came after land animals. But the Bible said the whale came before land animals. The whales were made on day 5, and day 6 was the day 6 was the land animals. So anybody who believes in theistic evolution is at a illogical position. How can whales come before and after land animals? It can't. Okay, but here's Rhodocetus, and they got the same thing at the Sauk Rapids textbook. And Dr. Carl Werner, he went to the guy who discovered Rhodocetus, and he interviewed him. And this is what he found.
When this video series was being filmed on location at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, the executive producer noticed a discrepancy between museum drawings of Rhodocetus and the fossils. The reconstruction of Rhodocetus had a whale fluke, but there were no fossils of the tail to confirm this. Dr. Phil Gingrich, the scientist responsible for the discovery and reconstruction of Rhodocetus, was questioned how he knew there was a whale fluke on Rhodocetus, since that part of the fossil was missing.
What was the reasoning that the scientists think there was a fluke on Rhodocetus based on the other pieces of anatomy?
Well, I told you we don't have the tail in Rhodocetus, so we don't know for sure whether it had a ball vertebra indicating a fluke or not. So I speculated it might have had a fluke.
Scientist Gingrich also acknowledged that the flippers were drawn on the diagram without these fossils. Now, he does not believe this animal had flippers. Again, his answer was surprising, since the museum diagrams had flippers on Rhodocetus.
Now, since then, we've found the forelimbs, the hands, and the front arm, the arms, in other words, of Rhodocetus. And we understand that it doesn't have the kind of arms that can be spread out like flippers are on a whale. And if you don't have flippers, I don't think you can have a fluke tail and really powered swimming. And so I now doubt that Rhodocetus would have had a fluke tail.
Many experts consider whales to be the best fossil evidence for evolution, but are unaware of these discrepancies. Opponents of evolution contend that whale evolution is nothing more than hopeful supposition. If museum diagrams are redrawn and corrected for various discrepancies, opponents argue that whale evolution is non-existent.
So does that confirm what Ernst Haeckel said? You know, Ernst Haeckel, he had these drawings that weren't accurate. This guy has drawings in his own museum that he knows are not accurate, and they're still being presented, and it's in the textbooks. And then he went on and he thought, you know, if evolution is false, the modern animals should look just like the fossil ancestors because nothing changed. And that's what he found. He went into the museums and he said, this is a sign that says gars haven't changed much during the last 100 million years. You know, it's difficult to distinguish those from the ones living today. So nothing changed for them, nothing changed for the shrimp. He's in the museum and he said, wow, that fossil shrimp looks just like the stuff from Louisiana. And then he went and he looked and he saw what the scientists call them. That's what's in the red box there. There's 2 Latin words, which is the scientific name for each of them. And scientists don't think they're the same genus or species. And this is how they name it. You got the family, genus, species there at the bottom. So it's the real specific species and then the real, a little bit more general genus. And you got these 2 skulls. Who thinks they're the same species? Nobody. Who thinks they're the same genus? Nobody. Well, they're actually both Canis familiaris. Anybody know what that is? A dog. That's right. You can have that much variety within a dog kind. You got the long, stretched out Irish wolfhound skull or the pushed in bulldog skull, and they're the same species. And that much variety in that same species, but when they look identical, the scientists think they're different. And that's what volume 2 is about. Time and time again, horseshoe crab look the same, different genus, different species, different genus, different species. They're identical, but at first he thought, well, maybe the scientist had a bad day. He just didn't realize there was a fossil that looked like this. But it's not. It's not the exception. It's the rule. Everything. He looks identical. I mean, how can that get any different? But different genus, different species. Again, and the book just goes on and on, these things that are identical. Won't even try to pronounce them, but trust me, they're different. And the alligators and the sharks and the coelacanth, the scientists are just blinded, I believe, by their evolutionary belief in millions of years, so they can't call them the same thing. And there's this textbook that says, yeah, the modern coelacanth, it came from this extinct type of animal, and they look the same. Okay, so that was volume 2. Now let's go on to volume 3. This is Untold Stories of Human Evolution, and this is where it gets really interesting. And here's a spoiler alert. There were 5 ape men were created using ordinary animal bones. 40 professional scientists promoted these ape men, which were made out using dolphin, cat, dog, hippo, pig, horse, donkey, raccoon, and bovid family bones. And these scientists held 43 university professorships. They're the experts. And they thought all those bones were ape man bones. And then they also authored 4,500 science journal articles and written 128 books on the topic of evolution. You know, these are the experts. But they also misinterpreted 16,000 ordinary rocks. It's ape man tools when they were actually ordinary rocks. So these are the experts. This isn't science. Okay, now it's going to get really interesting. The first character is William Jennings Bryan. He won the presidential nomination 3 times, so he ran for president 3 times, so everybody knows who he is. He was a senator from Nebraska for 2 terms. He was Wilson's Secretary of State, so everybody knows what he said. Everybody knows him, and he's very articulate, very informed. And he wrote an article for the New York Times. I think it was Sunday edition, front page, in God and Evolution. Charged that American teachers of Darwinism make the Bible a scrap of paper. And then at the very end of it, he called out the president of the American Museum of Natural History and invited him to respond. So he publicly calls out the expert on evolution. And that brings us to our next character. This is Dr. Henry Osborn. And he spent most of his career at the prestigious American Museum of Natural History in New York City. So a very prestigious museum. And he's ticked off. He's got to respond to this crazy creationist about evolution. And so he responds. But let's see what he had to believe, what he thought. He said that the standard of intelligence of the average adult Negro is similar to that of an 11-year-old youth of the species Homo sapiens. So he thought blacks were a different species. He's an expert. Should we trust the experts? And he did respond. It was kind of a milquetoast thing, and it's just, yeah, evolution's true. So now there's a public debate between creation and evolution going on in the New York Times. And that's going out all over the country. And I suppose people are picking sides for creation and evolution. And this one guy said he thought he'd help out. And he sent Dr. Osborn a tooth and said it's an ape man tooth that they found in Nebraska. They found a tooth. And so now just look at this. Does Dr. Osborn have any conflict of interests here? And if Dr. Osborn was correct in interpreting Cook's fossil tooth as being from a human-like ape, the importance of the discovery for evolution and the positive publicity generated for the American Museum would be enormous. But if he was wrong, the negative fallout for the museum and the public's acceptance of evolution would be crippling, since Osborn was now debating with the well-known Bryan in the New York Times. Yeah, so it could be very embarrassing if he's wrong, so he's very, very motivated to prove it right, because it's a public debate. It kind of reminds me of Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro. They're going to debate when she gets back in the country. So that sparks are going to fly there. And this is a big public debate on a very important topic. And so what did Dr. Osborn do? He got together his dream team. Anybody who knows more about fossil teeth than him, he got on his side. And Drs. Osborn, Matthew, and Gregory were considered the world's best of the best and had unrivaled experience in the scientific study of mammalian fossilized teeth. So they're the experts of the experts. And they published it in these two scientific journals, and some scientists from London pushed back. And they said, how can this be scientific? He just gave us drawings of the teeth. That doesn't help. We want x-rays. And so Osborn complies and sends them the x-rays with a note. He reminded his London colleagues of the heated battle raging in the United States over the controversial topic of evolution. Any unfavorable comments from the London scientists regarding his fossil would undermine the theory of evolution and jeopardize his hard-fought public relations battle with Williams J. Bryan. So this has moved out of science right now. Now it's political. It's like, yeah, you guys don't critique this because you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. We're trying to get people to believe in evolution. And if you critique me, that's going to be hard for evolution. And so from that single tooth, the Illustrated London News made this drawing of the Nebraska man. The Nebraska ape man from one tooth. You got to be pretty good to know what the ape man looked like from one tooth. And not only that, the tools he used and the family. And this picture is from those books. I'm telling you, these are beautiful books. And I got the PDFs of this. You can get Kindle on Amazon, but it's not very good. Get the PDFs from Carl Werner. It's just beautiful, beautiful. And even this is from there. You can read some of these articles. Just beautiful, well put together. So now the New York Times piles on Nebraska ape man of the Western world. And then a few years later, in 1925, they had the Scopes monkey trial. And this is where they were arguing whether they could teach human evolution. I think they were teaching evolution, if I understand right. This was about, can you teach human evolution, that humans came from ape-like ancestors. And so you had William Jennings Bryan arguing that it shouldn't. Then you had Clarence Darrow saying that it should. And what happened? Bryan was confronted with a battery of great scientific experts who stunned him with the facts of Nebraska man. And the experts scoffed and made a mockery of him. After all, who is he to question the world's greatest scientific authorities? And now this is when radio is involved. So now people all over the world are listening to this creation versus evolution debate. And so on one of the days, let's see, William Jennings Bryan, he took the stand and he would let the guy ask him questions about creation. And he didn't answer them very well. And then the next day, the other guy, Darrow, was supposed to go up onto the stand, and William Jennings Bryan was going to ask him about evolution, and he would have looked like an idiot trying to answer those questions. But the second day, they just said, hey, Judge, we're guilty. We're guilty, yeah. And so they just shut it down there, so the world got to see half of the argument. It was very slippery what they did there. And then years after the Scopes trial, the tooth upon which the Nebraska man was constructed belonged to an extinct species of pig. Pig. That's what it was in 1922. There's the ape man. 1927, there's the pig. It's the same tooth. And the scientific community lost a lot of credit back there, a lot of credibility back then. If you can confuse a tooth from an ape man and it's a pig, you know, what else are you wrong about? And now, was it a mistake or was it a fraud? See, just because they interpreted an ape man tooth as a pig tooth as an ape man, that's not fraud. That's a mistake, that's incompetence, but it's not fraud. But what is fraud? When Dr. Osborne falsely claimed that Harold Cook found the tooth in 1921, he said they found it last year, and that was a lie. They found it in 1917. And the other fraud was in 1909, they found a pig jaw. And they looked at the teeth and they said, those look like human teeth. And they even wrote about it and they said, be careful about finding teeth in this site because the pig teeth look like human teeth. And that was written. And then when he compared that tooth to all these other animals, he didn't compare it to the pig tooth. And so that's two frauds. They knowingly withheld information or lied about the information. And then in 1922, that's when he got called out, public debate. And then in 26, around in there, they figured out it was a pig. And then a year later, they announced it right around Christmas, hoping nobody would notice. And so what happens to this guy who was made that big of a blunder? It's a pig, not a human. You know, and he lied about it. He committed fraud. Did he retire in shame? Was his career ruined? No, it was a boost. Dr. Osborne was elected president of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, the highest honor that U.S. and Canadian science can give a colleague. And he appeared on the cover of Time magazine. So it doesn't matter if you lie and commit fraud, but if you're doing it against God, hey, we'll promote you, we'll pat you on the back, we'll give you publicity. And then like Mark Armitage, he did actually real science. He found a bone cell in a triceratops horn, and bone cells can't last millions of years. And he got fired. Yeah, he sued him for wrongful termination and he won, you know, but he's not teaching there anymore. Okay, let's move on to the Tong child. Now we're moving over to South Africa. This isn't just in America. This is in South Africa. This is Dr. Raymond Dart. Who was his mentor? Well, it was Dr. Grafton Smith from London. And he endorsed not one, not two, but 3 ape-man frauds. There was Piltdown Man that he endorsed, which was an ape jaw and a human skull, and that was in the textbooks for 40 years before anybody could get their hands on it. And then he endorsed the Neanderthal as an ape man when it's a human. And then he endorsed Nebraska Man, which we just talked about. So this Dr. Dart, he says, man, those ape men are everywhere. And he found this skull that looks identical to a modern juvenile chimpanzee skull. And he says, no, this is Tong child. That's a juvenile ape man. And it looks identical. He gets reprimanded by 4 of his colleagues saying, it's a chimp. Don't make it into something that it's not. So what happened after he got reprimanded? He got promoted. Yeah, they liked the attention the college got, and I think somebody else liked that he was standing up to God's word, probably, my guess. And they appointed him Dean of the Faculty of Medicine. But he didn't like the criticism, so he kind of stayed in the shadows for about 10 years. Then somebody coaxed him out, and he's got a good imagination. He made an ape man out of, now these are all different bones that he put together in one ape man. And it was the dog, baboon, monkey, cow, horse, and cat kind of bones. And he made him into ape man. And that's been falsified. And then he found all these bone chips laying around, and he said, those are ape man tools. And they were falsified too. This is Dr. Ron Clark. He said that all of the 14,812 collected stone tools from the cave were just ordinary rocks. 14,812, so they all got notes on them. We got way too much tax money going into this field of study. That's what I think, and it's still there. And then right before he died, he told his colleague, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. Never let the truth get in the way of a good story. Is that what Haeckel did? Yeah, he didn't let the truth get in the way. Is that what Osborne did? Yeah, he didn't let the truth get in the way. So is this kind of validating what Haeckel is saying? Hey, everybody's doing it. Well, let's just continue down the path. Now we're going to Orsi man. The oldest ape man ever discovered in Europe and Asia, the small town of Orsi, Spain, has since become a science tourism destination. Yeah, they got billboards, come look at our paleontological sites. And they found this skull, just a piece of a skull, and he said it's an ape man, and there's over 300 articles, plus radio and TV coverage in the very first year alone. And now that's starting to turn into economics, because that's a boom to that community. But then they cleaned off the inside of the skull, and they found these ridges there, where those arrows are pointing. And those ridges are from a donkey or a horse skull. Humans don't have those ridges. And so there was a doctor that says, hey, now that I said it was an ape man, but now that I see those ridges, I think it's a donkey skull. And that guy's going to have a press conference saying it's a ape man, and she's trying to get him to not do it, and he won't. And there's some reasons why he won't. I mean, just think if you had 500 guests coming to this little town for the International Science Conference at the end of the month to discuss the fossil ape man skull and its implications on human evolution. That's going to be pretty embarrassing if you say, I guess it wasn't an ape man. Second, he'd been promoted because it was an ape man skull. And then also, that little small town is now known as the Mecca of paleontology. So now not only is it political, it's economic. There's a lot of money coming into that town. They sure don't want it to be a dinosaur skull. And then his budget more than quadrupled. And then his team is all famous, and he's going to get royalties for writing a book about the ape man, not the donkey skull. And so he wouldn't cancel the press conference, so she had her own press conference, and she said, this is definitely a donkey. And another word for donkey is ass. And so the headlines were, ass is taken for a man, scientists make ass of an old skull, and the international conference was quickly and quietly canceled. A press conference to announce the mistake was never held. They had 300 articles about it's an ape man, and then they find out it's a donkey, and it's like, oh, crickets here. But the guy who found it, he didn't give up, because that's his meal ticket. And we'll get to him in just a minute, but how can this happen? Well, according to Tim White, Dr. Tim White, he says the problem with a lot of paleontologists is that they want so much to find a hominid ape man that any scrap of bone becomes a hominid. Like we talked about before, there was a dolphin rib, and hey, it's an ape man. That actually happened. And then they found all these stone tools around that skull, and about 1,400 of them could simply be called, ordinary rocks. And this guy says they're exaggerating fossil significance to ensure funding. There's no money to find a donkey skull, but there's a whole lot of money to find an ape man, because ape man that contradicts the Bible. And I think that's what a lot of this is. But the guy who found it, he did not give up. That's his meal ticket. He obtained endorsement for his Orsi ape man from prominent evolution scientists, such as Dr. Coppens, co-discoverer of Lucy, and also Philip Tobias. So my impression of that, reading between the lines, they made a good old boy club. I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. I'll say yours is an ape man, you say mine is an ape man. That's what I think is going on, because that Orsi ape man shows up. Remember, that was 1984 when that was happening. It's a donkey skull. But yet it still shows up in all these publications decades later. And this is just a small sampling of it. Even National Geographic and Nature think it's an ape man. And that museum's still there, saying that it's an ape man. That's a lot of money for that town. The former curator for the museum, Dr. Martinez, said most people don't believe that it is a human, especially the paleontologists. So they all think it's a joke. And it's pretty embarrassing to prop up something that's not true. Okay, that's just one of the examples, or two of the examples in Volume 3. Now let's move on to Volume 4, and we're just scratching to the top. He claims there's 150 documented cases of fraud. Not mistakes, fraud. And we're just scratching this top of it. And this is Lucy. This is the Cold Spring curriculum. And it said Lucy is a remarkably complete skeleton. So remarkably complete. And this is St. Cloud State's General Ed textbook. Lucy has a nearly complete skeleton. So remarkably complete, nearly complete. Does that look remarkably complete? Does that look nearly complete? So this is our two fraudulent statements that they gave to our kids. And this is what they make out of them. Notice there's no hand bones or feet bones, but what do they put on Lucy? Hands and feet and whites by the eye. They're trying to make that monkey into an ape man. And that monkey is 3.5 feet tall, and it's supposed to make 10-inch footprints over in Laetoli. It's pretty embarrassing. But then they found more of that species, and they find her hands and feet are curved like a chimp. And Carl Werner has documentation that says they're more curved than a chimp. And the discoverer there, that's Dr. Johansen, he said Lucy's knee was human. And when Dr. Werner went over to France and interviewed the co-director of that dig and asked him about the knee, that guy said it's an ape. And Carl Werner almost fell off his chair. It's like, it's an ape? What do you mean? Everywhere you look, it's human. He says, no, it's ape. But you never hear that. And then let's look at the hip. Okay, the hip on the left is a chimp. The hip on the right is a human. And the hip in the middle is Lucy. What does that look like? A chimp or a human? It looks like a chimp, right. But they didn't want that. You don't get money for finding chimps. You got to find ape men. And so what do? Do they change the theory to fit the evidence, or do they change the evidence to fit the theory? Well, let's just take a look at In Search of Human Origins. This is part 2. This is a NOVA documentary. And let's do it first. At first he says the perfect fit is a chimp. So it should be a chimp. Just leave it alone, but they don't.
The perfect fit was an illusion that made Lucy's hip bones seem to flare out like a chimp's. But all was not lost. Lovejoy decided he could restore the pelvis to its natural shape. He didn't want to tamper with the original, so he made a copy in plaster. He cut the damaged pieces out and put them back together the way they were before Lucy died. It was a tricky job, but after taking the kink out of the pelvis, it all fit together perfectly, like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. As a result, the angle of the hip looks nothing like a chimp's, but a lot like ours.
Yeah, I would hope so, if you cut it apart and put it back the way you want. You know, and I was at a kiosk next to the anthropology department, and I mentioned this to them, and they said, they didn't do that. And I said, sure they did. Do you want to see it? I had my computer right there. No, I don't want to see it. You know, don't let the facts get in the way of a good story. So is this kind of validating what Haeckel's saying? Everybody's doing it? And then, so now there's problems. Now these are the Laetoli footprints. They're 10 inches, okay? And Lucy's 3.5 feet, and she's supposed to make them. But there's no wiggle room here. This is St. Cloud State's general ed textbook. It says, Lucy most definitely walked upright. Not might have, not could have, most definitely. And then down at the bottom, they reinforce it. They definitely walked upright. Well, this is the Laetoli track, and they look just like human footprints, like they walked in the sand. And Johansen, he's got a problem with the knee, because his co-discoverer says it's an ape. He's got a problem with the hip, because people are seeing that, hey, that's not right. You shouldn't twist it like that. So this trackway became Dr. Johansen's strongest piece of evidence for Lucy walking upright on 2 feet. And Lucy was found, these tracks are like about 1,000 miles away from where they found Lucy. And so they say that's our evidence that she walked upright. Look at those footprints. One's a chimp, one's a human, and that's Laetoli in the middle. What is that? Is that a human or a chimp in the middle? You know, the chimp, the big toe shoots way out to the side. You don't see that in the Laetoli one. But this is where the fraud comes in. He said the only hominid present in the Laetoli deposit was the Lucy type. And by inference, the footprints must have been made by members of this species. So he's saying that's all the fossils we found. But then when Dr. Werner went to Laetoli over in Africa, and he said, yeah, could I take pictures, photograph your fossils? And it's Laetoli 1, fossil 1 comes out, and it's like a jaw. Laetoli 2, something else. Gets out to Laetoli 18, it's a human skull. And again, he almost fell off his chair. It's like there weren't any human skulls here, according to all the journal entries, and yet there was. And he didn't say that. And instead, Dr. Johansen had the opportunity to correct his misstatements in 1997, but he didn't. And he had and in his 2002 interview with the author, he didn't. This is the second example of Dr. Johansen seemingly and knowingly providing false information when communicating with the public about the ape man, Lucy. The first example was his false statement concerning Lucy's knee. Okay, now let's jump into carbon dating. You know, is it accurate? So one of the hallmarks of science is repeatability. So it doesn't matter who does the experiment. If you do the same test the same way, you should get the same result. And that doesn't happen when you're radiometric dating things. Dating rocks and fossils with radiometric tests falls short of this necessary criteria to be considered scientific. And she carbon dated a modern duck, and they got a 2,000-year date on it. And then you come to this KBS tuft. It's a rock layer in Kenya. And it's been dated probably 24 times, and they get a different result every time. Okay? Each time they come up with a different result. Therefore, all radiometric dates should be considered non-scientific, because they're getting different dates for the same rocks. But why would you date something that many times? And if you want to read about this, go into creation.com and read the article, "The Pigs Took It All." So everybody was pretty much in agreement that was over 200 million years old. But then they found mammal fossils beneath KBS tuft, and mammals weren't around 200 million years ago. So they said, well, that should be between 2 and 5 million years old. Okay, they had it tested 200 million years, and then they find some mammal fossils, and they say, well, that can't be right. So then they drop it down to 2 to 5 million years old. They found a human skull in with the mammals. So now you have to make it even newer. That's skull 1470. If that hadn't been found, the KBS tuft would still be dated at 2.61 million years. And so how are they going to date this? They can't use the radiometric dating. That's too much. And what they came down to was they're going to use, they think they know when the pigs went extinct and the elephants went extinct. So which one are they going to date it by? And the pigs won. In the 10-year controversy over the dating of one of the most important human fossils ever discovered, the pigs won. The pigs won over the elephants. The pigs won over potassium-argon dating. The pigs won over argon-argon dating. The pigs won over fusion track dating. And they won over paleomagnetism. The pigs took it all. But in reality, it wasn't the pigs that won. It was evolution that won. In the dating game, evolution always wins. So they have these scientific tests saying that it's 100 million years old. And they say, no, it can't be right because that doesn't allow for our theory to be true. And so by 2011, Lucy in the Smithsonian is a chimp. But those textbooks that I showed you, or the college one, that was 2012, still saying that Lucy walked upright. Okay, now we move on to Dr. Phyllis Tobias. And he succeeded Raymond Dart. You know, that guy, he could make ape men out of anything. And let's just listen to Dr. Clark explain what happened.
Dr. Ron Clark accused Dr. Tobias of committing fraud. He characterized it as a forgery, similar to the Piltdown Man fossil forgery.
The Piltdown forgery actually was very clever. The STW-53 forgery by Kernow and Tobias was stupid. Philip Tobias summoned me to his office and he said, I want you to make a new reconstruction of STW-53. And I said, oh, why? And he said, well, I'm not happy with the brain size, it's too small. And I said, but that's the way it is. It can't be made any bigger. The anatomy shows that was the size of the brain case. He wanted it to be a Homo habilis. In fact, he kept publishing this as a Homo habilis. He then asked a research fellow that he just appointed there, Darren Kernow, he asked him to make a new reconstruction. And what Kernow did was he separated out this near contact here. He separated it out by 8 millimeters and made this wider. He flexed the parietal occipital contact here. He flexed it upward to make it bigger. He took apart other pieces as well and expanded it. And he moved this frontal bone forward to make it very elongated. It's totally false because there was no justification for what they did. It was simply Philip Tobias's ambition to make this into a Homo habilis.
So change the data to fit the theory. And he wanted an ape man because that's where all the money is. And that's the extent that he would do. He had one of his colleagues put it together and he says, no, it's got to be bigger. This is the picture. It's pretty compact on the left and then it's pretty stretched out on the right. So when you find all these fragments, they have a lot of artistic license on what they want to discover. They can pretty much make it whatever they want it to be. And again, there's a lot of money for ape men, not a lot of money for chimps. Okay, so how does this happen? How does this happen when it's peer-reviewed journals? And Dr. Werner says they deny access to the fossils. They don't let anybody look at it. Like Piltdown Man, 1912, they said, hey, it's an ape man. Well, nobody could get to the fossils to analyze them until after the guy dead. Then the new guy took them out and said, like, wait a minute, this is the jaw of an ape and the skull of a human. It's an obvious fraud. And the same thing with Neanderthal man. Somebody went there in 1912 to look at the Neanderthal bones. And I think he went there again in 21 and 29. He went there transatlantic, voyage 3 times. And he wasn't able to analyze them properly. And who growing up thought Neanderthal man was an ape man? I mean, I was taught that. And it's not. They're human. They're human. And then the other reason, how does this happen? Well, reviewers want evolution to be true. Haeckel wanted it to be true, so he falsified things. Osborne wanted it to be true, so he lied about when they found the fossil. And it goes on and on. This goes back to Haeckel's frauds and forgeries. Evolution has always had such an appeal, no answering to God and his rules anymore, none of this inconvenient thou shalt nots, and one can pretend that he or she is standing with science while doing so. And unless full access is available, the fossil is not verifiable, not scientific. During the first 100 years of the theory of human evolution, the 3 most accepted, most promoted, and most talked about ape-man fossils, the Java man, the Neanderthal man, and Piltdown man, were kept off limits to many and most scientists, and that's still happening today. Carl Werner only got his hands on 10% of the fossils he wanted to see. And this one place let him see the old ape men that were disproved, but they wouldn't let him see the ones that are currently being propped up to be ape men. And so there's a big, big problem with science. So should we trust the experts? Should we trust the prestigious museums? And Dr. Carl Werner has said, they've lost a lot of trust. Holding up a tooth as an ape man and it's a pig, falsifying, manipulating all this data. What can they do to help it to be more trustworthy? And Carl Werner says there's a simple solution. Refuse to publish any article about any fossil unless the author first places high-quality color photographs of the original fossils in the public domain. This is what we found, guys. And then also make the fossils available for people who want to look at it. That would have stopped Neanderthal back in 1912. But there's only the good old boy club that gets to see them. And then also make the notes available about the dig site, the museum, and other animals that were found there. And that would have eliminated Nebraska man. They would have found the pig jaw. And then the last thing is, if anybody doesn't do what they're supposed to do here, they're banned from publishing again in that journal. So that would be a good step towards restoring the trust. If it be true, apparently it's true. Pretty much some of the reliability of the scientific men, it's if it be true, yeah, I think it's up for you to decide. I don't want to tell you what to think. I'm giving you all the information so you can make an informed decision. And there's scientific fraud out there. And don't take my word for it. This is Dr. Jerry Bergman. He spoke at Twin Cities Creation Science Association a while back. And this is and he's got 9 degrees. Very, very educated, very, very well published. He's got over 1,000 articles and books printed. Okay, and this is what he says.
The problem of fraud in society, it's a, quote, a serious, deeply rooted problem that affects no small number of contemporary scientific research studies, especially in the field of evolution. And I should add, especially in the field of medicine. Of all places where forgery should not be is in medicine. Why? I don't know if any of you have worked for medical school, but I have. And a lot of professors there, they don't get paid by the medical school. They get grants. And their salary comes from the grant. Well, if you don't get good results, your grant's not renewed. And so it's a matter of, can you feed your family? Or, hey, I will just tweak the results a little bit. So there's a strong incentive today for forgery in science. And so therefore there's an epidemic of forgery in science, and in medicine especially.
You can see the rest of that clip at on YouTube, TCCSA, Twin Cities Creation Science Association. There's a clip about 6 minutes long. It's very, very good. Because he was an outspoken atheist. He wrote articles. Madeline Marie O'Hare, she loved him. They got along great. And then he became a creationist and a Christian professor. And they asked him why. And he said, I studied science. Okay, and so go into that, and then you can see his full talk. Yeah, from outspoken atheist to Christian professors. That's what you're going to see. There's going to YouTube too, and there's this thing called TCCSA clips, and I think you'd really enjoy them. You know, there's a doctor saying all these amazing things that has to happen for a baby to stop living in fluid and start living in air. It's just amazing. I brought that thing up about the fraud and how there's an incentive to get grants to cook the books. And the instructor at the community college said yesterday, he said, well, there's things put in place to stop it. It's called peer review. And I said, yeah, that's to get published in a journal, but that's not for grants. And he goes, oh yeah, you're right. He was really, I would love to take a class with him. But this is Yuval Harari. When I first heard this, I didn't know if this was a deep fake or not, but I think the idea is pretty valid. And my wife, she found some other places where he did actually say this, apparently. But just take a listen to this.
The real aim of science as a project, as an establishment, is not truth, it's power. Particular individuals, particular scientists may be very interested in the truth, personally. But as an institution, the real aim of science is power, and therefore...
Follow the science. Let me say that again.
We've got to follow the science.
We must and we will be guided by the science.
Climate experts believe the next ice age is on its way. According to recent evidence, it could come sooner than anyone had expected. Within a lifetime, we might be living in the next ice age.
There is a 75% chance that the entire North Polar ice cap during some of the summer months could be completely ice-free within the next 5 to 7 years.
You have sea ice, which is melting at a rate that the Arctic Ocean now increasingly is exposed. In 5 years, scientists predict we will have the first ice-free Arctic summer.
Science is not really about truth, it's about power.
So did the scientists have a lot of power the last few years? They sure did. Yeah, they had a lot of power. And now they're starting to get power with the climate agenda. And I encourage everybody to read Inconvenient Facts so you can realize, hey, if we get more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, we get more food and less droughts. We shouldn't be freaking out over it. You need to see both sides of every situation so you can come to an informed conclusion. And typically, you know, I've seen creationists get censored for decades. And then we saw doctors get censored these last few years. And now I saw Candace Owens get censored. You know, she's got this podcast, and that's going to be very interesting. She spoke out. Oh, that's another topic. Okay, so who trusts the experts? No hands. Are they trustworthy? You know, I think we need to start asking questions. You know, who is William Jennings Bryant to complain or to question the experts? I think we need to question the experts. And we need to look who's getting censored. Because people who are getting censored have probably got the truth. And so to wind this up, we are very thankful for Debbie and Carl, the Werners, what they did over the last 27 years and what he did over the last 18 years of study, 27 years of putting this all together, and it just hit the presses last month. I encourage people, the way we thank him is to get his material and share it. You know, if he's got bombshell material, but it doesn't do any good if nobody knows about it. And the media is certainly not going to do their part. So it has to be a grassroots project. He's got DVDs, he's got books, he's got a homeschool curriculum. I encourage people to get that into your Christian schools. And you can get all these at thegrandexperiment.com. Thegrandexperiment.com. And again, you can get you get PDFs. And I ordered the PDF and I didn't get it, so I thought it failed. And so I canceled my order. And so, and I found out, and I emailed him, I said, you might have a problem with this thing. And he says, well, it takes 24 to 72 hours to get it. You know, it says it on the first page, but it doesn't say it in your receipt. You know, I missed it on the first page. So if you do order that, and the PDFs are beautiful, if you don't get it anything within, it's going to take a little bit of time. Okay, so are the experts, are they trustworthy? Would you bet your life that the experts are telling you the truth? Would you bet your eternal life that the experts are telling you the truth? They're saying we came from 8 men. I encourage people to put their faith in someone who doesn't lie. You can trust Jesus. Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. So Jesus actually walked and lived, and I said this at the library or at the college yesterday. He actually walked, and he changed our whole calendar. BC stands for before Christ, and they're changing it to BCE, before Common Era. But whatever you call it, something happened, and that was Jesus Christ. And what did he do to change our calendar? He died on a cross to pay for our sins, so we can go to heaven. And he rose again. And that's the key to heaven. It's by grace are you saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It's the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. And that's why we do this. We want people to see the Creator and then put their faith in his Son, so then people can go to heaven. And these are the books that he's got. And I encourage people to listen to this interview on Real Science Radio. Their last few have been bombshells. This is coming up on Tuesday. Jay Siegert's going to be speaking at the Twin Cities Creation Science Association. If you don't want to make the trip, you can watch it on Zoom or on YouTube Live. That's going to be Tuesday at 7. And then he's also going to be speaking May 3rd through the 5th down at Living Waters Bible Camp. I took that picture. It's just a beautiful place. Rolling hills, trout stream. And it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Take a mini creation vacation with your family. There's something for all ages. It'd be a lot of fun with hay rides and stargazing. And I'm going because Randy Galuza is speaking. He's the president of ICR. And I have so much respect for him, the way he's running that organization. Go into ICR.org, make a donation if you want. And also sign up for Acts and Facts. You get a free newsletter. So thank you for your attention. I appreciate that.